Yes, all those images are really me. Nehama, born Melbourne, 1939. First creative dance class, age 5, and first piano lesson, age 5. First student enrolled at the Newman Scopus College, founded by my father in 1949. First job playing for modern dance classes in 1956. My first and last marriage, 1959. First son, 1961, and second son, 1965. First female presenter for Play School, 1966. First joint, New York, circa 1970. First director of the Caulfield Yamaha Music School in 1972. The first and last joyous divorce in 1974. And then came Suzuki in 1977 and my passion for teaching. And for those of you who know me, you know I will. But first, allow me to play for you.
much ahead for us to do and hear and see. I wonder what you'll think of me. This isn't a recital, much less an opera bouffe. I won't be singing cycle from Fiddler on the Roof. It's not an oratorio with choruses by Handel, no passage from the Torah, 'cause I haven't got a candle. Suzuki's not in evidence, no kids from Yamaha, no stories that are too intense, or gossip about a star. Ah, maybe later at the bar. It's not... You'll get your turn later, I promise, but I know it's not a fugue or descant or tune or strain or song. It's not a melody or plain chant, thank God it won't take long. It's not a dance or TV show, a Stedford or chorale, and it's not a talk in parenting to build up your morale. My life's not been a symphony or a Chopin polonaise, but an exercise in harmony in many various ways. Scriabin?
No, Nehama.
Prokofiev?
No.
Shostakovich?
No.
I know, Messiaen.
More like Messy Man.
Oh, well, you said it. It's all these things I have a lot to say. It's not the story of my life, 'cause we haven't got all day. But 60 years, I hardly know where to start. This evening's just got underway. It's true, I've got a lot to say. It's not my life in music, it's the music in my heart. It's not my life in music, it's the music in my life. I'm such a Melbourne girl. My parents, Hemda and Bension Patkin, came to Melbourne in 1929 from Palestine before the birth of the State of Israel, and they very quickly became firm members of Melbourne's Jewish community. Now, I grew up in a very traditional Jewish home. We celebrated all the Jewish holidays with all the trimmings, but I especially remember our Friday nights. They were very special family night dinners. My mother always lit the candles before the Shabbat dinner, the Sabbath dinner. My father always said Kiddush, or the prayers, before dinner. But it was never just our family. It was usually an extended family, like relatives or relatives of friends, or people visiting, Jewish people visiting from other countries, and especially concert performers or artists or writers. And invariably, my father would forget to tell my mother that he'd invited these people until late on Friday afternoon. My mother's comments were always the same. Before the evening meal, she'd say, "Why did you tell me that you were going to invite more people? We mightn't have enough chopped liver, we mightn't have enough chicken soup, and we mightn't have enough gefilte fish," but invariably there was always enough to eat. Not just for Friday night, but for the whole weekend. Some visitors that I particularly remember visiting our house for the Friday night meal was the Barenboim family. Yeah, Daniel Barenboim, the pianist conductor who was married to Jacqueline Dupre. And he was invited by the ABC as a guest artist to perform in Melbourne with the then Victorian Symphony Orchestra, and also to give a solo recital. And I was a few years older than him, but I was just sat there in awe, and I can remember him telling one joke after the other and never pausing for breath. And then I remember his father looking at him as fathers do when they're maybe not so pleased with their son, and speaking in Spanish because they were from Argentina. And Daniel was like 15, going on 30. Well, they were very special. My father was a very good man. He only saw the good in other people, especially Jewish people. And once I was giving a concert with some other performers at Pentridge. It's okay, it was A division, long-term prisoners, well-behaved. And I went with some other performers, and I played the guitar and sang some Australian songs and some Hebrew songs and Yiddish songs and French songs. And after the performance, we were having afternoon tea with some of the prisoners. And these two guys came up to me, and they started talking in Hebrew. And of course, my initial reaction was to answer back in Hebrew, and I asked, "What are you doing in here?" And they said something like, "Oh, something to do with car licenses and cars." And so I went home and told my father this story. And I said, "You never believe, I met some Israelis in Pentridge, and they were in there for selling car licenses illegally." Well, my father just looked at me and said, "Impossible." End of story. Back to me. Ima and Abba, which is what I called my parents from when I could talk, that means mummy and daddy in Hebrew, they gave birth to my brother Michael. And they gave him that simple name, Michael. And then I arrived 6 years later, and they called me Nehama Ruth Patkin. Well, going to Shelford Girls Anglican School with a name like Nehama Ruth Patkin was not exactly ideal in the early 50s, and I soon heard murmurings around me of banana, rude and napkin. So I very quickly dispensed with the Nehama and became Ruth Patkin for quite a few years, until I was 12. And that's when I met Hefziba Menuhin, or in the anglicised version, Hefziba Menuhin, that phenomenal pianist and the sister of the fantastic violinist and teacher, Yehudi Menuhin. Well, I thought, if she can go around the world with a name like Hefziba Menuhin and have it on all the billboards and people on the radio can say it without tripping over it, Nehama can't be that difficult. And I guess I was just getting to an age where it was nice to be that little bit individual, and so I then became Nehama Patkin and dispensed with the Ruth. That's not the end of the story. Some years later, I was invited to be an adjudicator at the St John's of Stedford in Ballarat. So I arrived on this cold, wintry morning to the hall in Ballarat and came into the hall and saw a table there ready for me, I thought, for the adjudicator, and there was a lady sitting there, so I thought, well, she was going to help me. So I walked up to her very politely, introduced myself and asked her if I should let anybody know that I was here. Well, I didn't have to, because there on the stage, far down the hall, was this lady. I remember she was quite elderly, and she had bow legs like this, and she had this fox fur around it with legs and a head. And she had this hat plonked on her head. And she was in front of the microphone, and this booming voice came down the hall. "Will all competitors in the first section, the under 10 section for the St John's of Stedford, make sure that you've registered down the back of the hall, and then come up the side to the back of the stage, or you'll miss out on your section." "Oh, I see our adjudicator has arrived. Would you please welcome Miss Hatpin?" Some years after that, I was doing quite a lot of accompaniment with people like Suzanne Johnston and many other singers. And one particular occasion when Susie and I were invited to be the guest artists at a bowling night trophy club, we did a lot of those, the MC had no problem whatsoever, of course, in welcoming Suzanne Johnston. But when it came to the accompanist, would you please welcome our accompanist, Miss Noho Patkin. So I became Noho Hatkin for quite a while amongst my friends. It wasn't long after that that I went again, Susie and I and Donald Catt, the well-known baritone, and we were doing an RSL. And it was an RSL club sort of annual end-of-year Christmas celebration. Again, the MC, but I think he'd been there as long as the RSL, because he went in his dinner suit with his white tuxedo, and his hands were shaking a bit, and he didn't know whether to put his glasses down or up, and he welcomed Suzanne and Don with no problem whatsoever. But when it came to me, it was no, no, ooh, no, no. And there was a guy at the front table with a schooner of beer, and he yelled out, Muhammad Ali! Well, I have been called Mrs. Prettykin on occasions. And of course, working for Yamaha for 6 years, oh, that had its laughs, because not only was I Miss Nehama, but I was Miss Yamanahama, Miss Yahama, Miss Yokohama, Miss Nehama, which I have shares in the perfume company, and Namacha, and any other derivation that you can think of. I even had letters addressed to me from the university saying, Dear Mahatma. And just recently, I received a lovely letter and a certificate from the Channel 7 Good Friday Appeal, thanking me and my young musicians of excellence, my students, for our musical contribution to the Good Friday Appeal. The letter was lovely, the certificate was beautiful, and the inscription was Nehama, Nehama, Padkin, Padhkin. I felt like the proprietor of some Papadam company. And when I was just 1 year old, she put my hands on the piano, she often did anyway, but she announced to my mother she was born to play the piano. And when I was just 6 years old, we moved to East St Kilda, which was to be my home for quite a number of years. And I began my piano studies with Gladys L. Home. Now, Miss Home used to drive this little brown prefect, and she used to come to my house to give me my piano lessons every Monday and Thursday from 7:30 till 8 a.m. And she had so much confidence in my musical abilities that as the years went on, she absolutely promised me to Roy Shepherd, the doyen of piano teachers at Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. She told him that when I was 12, he would take me, and I had done grade 7, and I would be ready to do my associate diploma, A+A. And that's exactly what happened, because she said it would. And at 12, Roy Shepherd accepted me, and I was ready to do my associate diploma, which I did, A+A. And I stayed with Mr. Shepherd until I'd completed my Bachelor of Music degree in 1959 at the age of 20. The wonderful thing about those years was that both of those teachers gave me lots of opportunities to perform. They both entered me into lots of Eisteddfods and lots of music festivals. So not only did I hear beautiful music being played, but played by some phenomenal young pianists. I'd like to play for you now one of the first pieces that I ever studied with Mr. Roy Shepherd. And it's with this piece that I got first place in Swallows Junior's Talent Quest on 3DB. To be a world-famous concert pianist, because there were always so many other things that I wanted to be and do. In fact, one of the things that I wanted to do was be a really good ice skater, maybe a famous Australian ice skater, because I used to go to St. Moritz down at St Kilda to the ice skating rink most Saturday afternoons and during the holidays, and I used to see all these gorgeous girls in the middle with their white boots and their little short skirts, and I thought, oh, it would be lovely to wear those clothes and look like that and be able to skate, and I just love the whole movement. And so I very quickly graduated from holding the rail around the side into the middle, but I had those horrible black leather hire skates that you had to have if you hired skates, and so it didn't look good in the middle. And so I asked my parents if I could please have some white leather boots for skates, and they said yes. Well, you have to go and order them. So I took myself off to the city, to Maloney's, which was the only place where you could order ice skates, and I ordered them. They were to be picked up in 3 weeks, and for some reason I never got there. And 6 weeks later I got there and they'd been sold. So I went through the whole process again and reordered, and the same thing happened. Never picked them up. So do you call that procrastination? If you do, then nothing's changed. Anyway, skating then sort of just seemed to slide away. If I didn't have the white boots, I couldn't continue skating. Because actually what I really wanted to be was a beautiful classical ballet dancer. Oh, I just loved seeing all the dancers in the white tutus that just stuck out in the pink ballet shoes. And I had studied dance from when I was 5. And I used to go from the age of 5 to the School of Creative Dance that was run by Hanny Colm, later to be Hanny Exener, with her working partner Daisy Pianizza at 177 Collins Street. And that's where I went every week from the age of 5. But I really wanted to dance on toes. But the wonderful thing about going to those dance classes were all the pianists improvised, because we did interpretive dance in the style of Isadora Duncan. We fluttered around and we floated and we jumped and we sprang in the air to fantastic music played by these pianists, sometimes music like this. And other wonderful masterpieces. And we also did exercises at the bar in very classical style, not totally turned out. Well, we did first position, and we did second position, and we did third position, and we did little points and high kicks and all those things. So I really got a taste of classical ballet, especially because I was taken to every classical ballet performance that was on. Whether it was the National Theatre Ballet Company or visiting companies, I saw every Margaret O'Brien film that was ever made, and the Borovansky Ballet Company. Now, there was a Borovansky Ballet School in Melbourne, and after much begging and cajoling to my parents, they finally, at the age of 12, that magic age, they let me go to the Borovansky Ballet School. So every Thursday I would trundle off to Elizabeth Street in the city, and from 5:30 to 6:30 I would go to a classical ballet class. And I actually did get a tutu, and I got some pink toe shoes. And I loved the tutu sticking out. The only problem was that I stuck out in lots of other places too. And all the girls in the class were really skinny, and they just were straight up and down. And I sort of stuck out a bit here, and I stuck out a bit here. Unfortunately, I didn't stick out down there because I didn't have any instep and my feet were flat. And my hair just didn't stay down sleekly like all the other girls. No matter how much of my brother's Brill cream I put on it, it just didn't work. Oh, all I can say is thank God for blow dryers now. Well, I finally went to the Borovansky Ballet School, and that, as I said, that was to be a life-changing time for me, which I didn't realise until many years later. At the end of the year, we had the Christmas concert, or the ballet concert at the end of the year. And I was in a ballet with lots of other young little girls, but the one thing that I remember so well was sitting at the sidelines and watching a rehearsal of Madame Borovansky, who was quite elderly then, sitting in the second position as ballet teachers did. And when they were not able to demonstrate, they used their arms to demonstrate the lead positions. And she was rehearsing a young girl who was going to dance the Swan Queen solo from Swan Lake. And it went something like this. Thank you, Peter. And sharp, and sharp, and soft, and sharp, and sharp, and soft, and sharp, and sharp, and soft, and sharp, and... Oh, we'll leave it there. Well, many years later, when I was giving a piano lesson, I was explaining to one of my students about a phrase that she was playing, and that it needed to start very sharply and finish very softly. And I found myself doing the same hand movements. It just took me back 30 years. I'd never thought of it before. And suddenly I remembered Madame sitting there and explaining this to the young dancer, and I realized that that had been my first lesson in musical interpretation. So I began to look at ballet and dance with totally new eyes, and I was listening to music with totally new ears. Oh, thank you, Peter, for reminding me. That just takes me back to the School of Creative Dance when I had my first dance concert, so much performing in my younger years. I was really very fortunate. Well, one of the first ballets that I was cast in was as a tightrope dancer in the circus. Went something like this. Made it. And then I was cast years later as the Cowardly Lion in our version of The Wizard of Oz. Mr. Rudy Lecuona. He was one of our dance accompanists. And I was always very intrigued by Mr. Lecuona because he was a very suave-looking man, always very tanned. He always wore a gabardine raincoat and was always done up at the waist. And when he played the piano, it was absolutely awesome. He used to pedal with one foot, but the other one was crossed over underneath the raincoat. And when he played, he never looked at the keys. That was totally awesome. And he was particularly interested when we were doing floor exercises. Rudy was a very apt name, don't you think? 10 years later, when I began to play for dance classes, one of the tunes that I played for exercises was